He fired her for taking a call, not knowing she would decide his company's future. What happens when a quietly fired assistant decides to speak up? Amalia Brooks was just another name on a layoff list, until she exposed a system so broken it shook the entire boardroom. What happened next didn't just change the company, it redefined what justice means in corporate America. Amalia Brooks didn't run late, not to work, not to appointments, not even to the train platform at 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning with coffee in one hand and her daughter's allergy meds in the other. Tardiness wasn't an option. It was a liability, and not the kind you could shrug off with a "my bad." When you're a black woman from East Bronx, being late isn't a blip. It's a mark, like graffiti scrawled across your name. Unreliable, undisciplined, ungrateful. It's what they use to fire you with a straight face and a clear conscience, like brushing lint off a lapel. That morning, Amalia walked through the tinted glass doors of Hardin Tech at precisely 7:54 a.m. Same routine, same stride, gray dress to the knees, solid block heels for long-standing hours, hair pressed and pinned without a strand out of place. Her desk sat strategically wedged between the coffee station and the scanner, right in the eye line of passing managers, but far enough from the conference room to be ignored by decision makers. And that's how she liked it. Unseen, uninterrupted, indispensable. She worked like every keystroke was a form of protest against a system that had already counted her out. Then came the call. Not a client line, not a calendar ping. No, this one lit up her screen in red. Nanny, emergency. Her stomach turned. Ellie, her daughter. Her reason for inhaling and exhaling every day. Her lungs seemed to freeze in place as she snatched the phone to her ear. Amalia, where are you? The nanny's voice cracked. Ellie's bad. She's wheezing again. Hard this time. I already called the ambulance, but she's barely breathing. There was no time for words. No, I'm coming. No, hold on. Amalia dropped the phone, grabbed her bag, and flew through the office like a gust of wind, past startled coworkers, past a manager who just started forming words. Maybe a reprimand, maybe a question about paperwork. Didn't matter. Her child couldn't breathe. The world could wait. 40 minutes later, she was in the ER, sitting stiff-backed in a blue plastic chair beside a hospital bed where Ellie lay with tubes in her nose and a heart monitor pulsing like a ticking clock. A nurse told her they made it just in time. A few minutes later, and oxygen might not have reached her in time. Funny thing, work didn't even cross her mind until the sun came up the next day. She returned to Hardin Tech with dark circles under her eyes, a worn expression, and a tight knot of gratitude lodged in her chest. Ellie was stable. That was all that mattered, until she saw the envelope. A single white envelope on her desk. No note, no conversation. Just a cold, clinical severance notice, typed like a weather report. Due to violation of workplace discipline, abandonment of post, and failure to adhere to job responsibilities, your employment with Hardin Tech is hereby terminated, effective immediately. Signed, D. Price, Director of Human Resources, the same man who once led a diversity training while eating a turkey sandwich. She stared at the page, not reading, not even reacting, just looking. No, looking through it, as if her soul had stepped outside her body and was watching the whole thing from across the room. A black woman, a single mother, who had just saved her child's life. Fired, just like that. No meeting, no empathy, just paper. She started to speak, her voice dry, thin. Sorry, Price cut in, eyes glued to his laptop like he was filing his nails instead of slicing through someone's livelihood. We have strict rules. The company can't afford chaos. Chaos. She repeated it in her head like a bad joke. You call saving my child chaos? She smiled, but not the kind of smile she gave Ellie when tucking her in at night. This one was bitter, restrained, dipped in fatigue and salt. The kind of smile you wear when you've accepted that fairness in this country is more of a courtesy than a right, and you're not on the guest list. She didn't make a scene. No yelling, no weeping, just a straight spine and slow steps as she walked out of that building. Because when you're a black woman and the world's been telling you for 40 years that you're too much, you learn not to fall apart every time another man in a tie mistakes himself for the law. 3 days later, Amalia was slinging greasy wings and soggy fries at a 24-hour diner downtown. One of those places where the ketchup always runs and the floors never dry. She didn't complain, didn't have time. She counted quarters, organized Ellie's prescriptions, and tried not to think about how close she'd been to that promotion. The one that could have finally pulled her out of the basement level of life. Then it happened. In the break room, If you could call a mop closet with folding chairs a break room, she overheard two line cooks talking over a pack of half-eaten fries. Yo, you hear about Price at Hardin Tech? One said. Yeah, man. Dude's sweating bullets. Somebody leaked all the internal complaints straight to the board. Racism, sexism, everything. Word is, he tried to fire some lady for taking a personal call. She flipped it, sent the whole thing upstairs. Amalia froze, not out of fear, not out of shock, but because for the first time she realized she wasn't alone. She wasn't the only one they'd tried to silence. She was just the one who finally got loud. Then her burner phone rang. Not her usual phone. Not the old one she used for Ellie's school or job apps. This was a new line, untraceable, bought in cash, for emergencies. Miss Brooks? The voice on the other end was calm, measured, male. We represent a group of civil rights advocates. We've been tracking your situation. She barely had time to breathe before he continued. We'd like to offer you a temporary position. We're compiling evidence to file a class action suit against Hardin Tech. We need someone who knows how it works on the inside, someone who saw it firsthand, someone who's already taken the hit and has nothing left to lose. There was a long pause and then quietly, like a promise, someone who's ready to fight. You don't have to say yes, the voice on the phone said, steady and firm, like someone who'd seen things go sideways before. But if you do, there's support. You'll have protection. Your name stays confidential. You'll get a stipend. We know you were terminated, but we also know you weren't just an assistant. Amalia Brooks sat at a greasy formica table by the window, in a place where the air smelled like cigarettes and cinnamon grease. Mama Loretta's cafe wasn't fancy. Far from it. The turkey was rubbery, the hash browns soggy, and the coffee always tasted vaguely like burnt toast. But here, nobody judged you. This was the kind of place where a grown woman could whisper a curse under her breath, wipe her eyes with a napkin, and get a free refill with a side hug from a 300-pound woman named Deborah, whose name tag was peeling, but heart never did. She stirred sugar into an empty coffee cup, eyes fixed on the gray New York outside, where the clouds hung low like truths people were too scared to say out loud. The silence in her ears buzzed after the call. Someone had just handed her more than a chance. They'd handed her ammunition, a shot at reclaiming her name, and, Lord have mercy, a chance to hit back. The next morning, she said yes. It began as a consultation, though that word didn't come close to what followed. Within 48 hours, she was paired with a man named Martin, former IT specialist, now full-time digital advocate, with a face that screamed quiet rebellion. He shipped her a secure laptop, set her up with a VPN that bounced through 5 countries, and gave her access to a data leak, one gathered during an internal audit that someone inside Hardin Tech had quietly funneled out. They thought you were just a coffee fetcher, he chuckled over Zoom. But you're out here reading case files like scripture. You've got a processor in that head, just never had the outlet. Amalia didn't laugh. She just nodded. Every night, once Ellie fell asleep under a tangle of blankets and humidifier mist, Amalia combed through files, dozens of anonymous logs, testimonies, screenshots, and statements that painted a picture no diversity report ever would. A black marketing coordinator wrote, "My manager said my fro was too aggressive for a client presentation." A senior analyst noted, "Got passed over for a project. Heard through the grapevine it was because of my accent." A former black manager admitted, "I quit, tired of being the only black person on the floor and being asked to sing at every holiday party like I was their personal jukebox." This wasn't just discrimination. It was theater, a show of smiling faces and performance reviews while behind the curtain, folks like Amalia were written off as extras. Replaceable, invisible. Then she found it. The document was dated 2 months before her firing. Author, D. Price, the same HR director who'd handed her the termination paper without meeting her eyes. Brooks is becoming a problem. Sharp, but she's got that mom complex. Acts like her situation gives her special status, keeping her on the list in case we need a quiet exit story. She won't sue. Too mild, keeping her on the list, in case they needed a scapegoat. Amalia's hand slipped. Her mug hit the floor, coffee seeping into the corner of the carpet like truth soaking into silence. She didn't flinch, didn't curse, just stared at the screen. That was how they saw her. Not a woman, not a mother, not a skilled, resilient professional. A placeholder, a plan B. That night she didn't sleep. She sat curled up next to Ellie, who snored softly under the blanket, and let the anger settle into something colder. Not revenge, clarity. She whispered into the dark, "Was it pain you felt, or have you just gotten too used to holding it?" One week later, she sat inside a cramped legal office in Midtown. Bare floors, fluorescent lights, and vending machine coffee. But here, power hummed in the walls. This was where stories became cases, where silence ended. Two attorneys sat across from her. Sherry, mid-50s, afro puff, and a stare sharp enough to cut through policies, and Jordan, a younger black lawyer with a documentary voice and steel in his posture. You don't have to speak, Sherry said gently. But if you do, they can't put the lid back on. Amalia looked at them, looked down, then nodded. I'm ready. I'll tell everything. The hearing day was brutal. Summer in the city where the subway turns into a sauna and everyone smells like heat and hurry. Amalia walked into the building wearing a gray power suit and sneakers. She didn't come to perform for respect. She came to bring receipts. Inside the panel room, fluorescent lights buzzed, and a low hum of tension filled the air like static before a storm. The committee chair, a soft-spoken older gentleman with silver hair and a no-nonsense tone, welcomed her. Ms. Brooks, you claim your dismissal was discriminatory. You also state you possess documentation. Are you prepared to present it? Amalia stood. I'm not the only one. I brought evidence. Printouts, emails, screenshots. You want proof? She lifted a thick file folder, bursting at the seams. I've got a binder full. You know how I got it all? I stayed up between diner shifts, asthma medication alarms, and washing barf off bed sheets. I collected it in my reality, while others clocked out and slept fine. Proceed, the chair said. She tapped the remote. The projector lit up. Emails, internal chat threads, staff evaluations, page after page of micro and macroaggression, sarcastic messages about diversity hires, jokes about hair, about urban attitudes, complaints filed and dismissed. And then came the audio. It was a recording of Price's voice. If someone's gotta go, it's her. She draws too much attention, too visible, too black for a second chance. The room went still. One panelist cleared their throat. Another dropped their pen. Amalia didn't blink. I'm not here for hush money, she said, her voice even. I'm here for the truth, because if we don't speak up, they'll keep treating our dignity like an expense report. And I've had enough of pretending silence is strength. Sherry gave her a look. Not pity, not admiration, recognition. The look women give each other when they know what it costs to speak, when the world would rather you stay silent. The session ended, but Amalia didn't feel lighter. She didn't feel victorious, just real. She walked out of that building like she walked into it, spine straight, head up, heart steady. Whatever happened next, she knew one thing. They'd never again mistake her for a footnote. She was the headline now. Amalia didn't sleep the night before the hearing. Not because of fear. That ship had sailed. Fear was a cheap echo now, far behind the storm that had taken residence inside her. No, what kept her awake was something bigger, deeper, a righteous fire that pulsed in her chest like a war drum. She sat at the foot of Ellie's bed, watching her baby sleep, her chest rising slowly with each breath, and thought about all the women before her, the ones who smiled at reception desk, nodded through meetings, bit their tongues while being overlooked, only to end up on the other side of a closed door with a severance envelope and the label, difficult. But no one said a good girl couldn't become their worst nightmare. The hearing wasn't in some courthouse or neutral site. It was inside hardened tech. Of course it was. The board of directors, boxed in by media pressure and the sudden stench of scandal, had called for an internal stakeholder review. The press was barred, but lawyers, third-party observers, and most importantly, Amalia Brooks, the woman who had flipped their cozy house of cards, were all in attendance. She arrived early, not out of habit this time, but intent. Amalia wasn't here to be on time. She was here to take up space. Across the conference room sat D. Price, the man who'd fired her like she was a smudge on his report. He wore a navy suit and a look that reeked of expensive anxiety. He didn't dare look at her. His eyes stayed glued to his lawyer or his notes or the microphone clipped to his lapel. Last time she saw him, he was composed, confident, maybe even smug. Today, he looked like a student called to the front of the class without pants on. The review board opened the session with a bombshell. In the course of our investigation, the lead commissioner began, his tone neutral but firm, we uncovered over 80 anonymous complaints filed by current and former employees over the past 3 years. Of those, 74 pertained to racially discriminatory behavior, wage disparities, and a hostile work environment. The room stiffened. Every single complaint, he continued, was submitted to human resources. Not one was escalated. Not one received a formal review. Many were logged and buried. A pause. Several names appear repeatedly throughout these reports, including Mr. Price, who coincidentally authorized the termination of Ms. Brooks without a disciplinary hearing, consultation, or documentation. One day after she left work due to a medical emergency involving her daughter, the air grew heavy. Price's forehead glistened. Even his attorney, previously poker-faced, leaned a few inches away, like the heat was catching. Then Amalia stood. "You ever hear what compassion sounds like in corporate speak?" she asked, her voice smooth but cutting. "It sounds like this. She's not a cultural fit. That's the sanitized version of she doesn't know her place. It's what you say when a black woman stops whispering and starts asking questions." She let her eyes sweep across the room. Directors in silk ties, women in ivory blazers, faces trained in the art of neutrality. But underneath it, fear. Not the fear of justice, the fear of exposure. Fear that their carefully manicured world, built on silence, might finally get a microphone. "I'm not your headache," Amalia said, eyes locked on the board chair. "I'm your mirror. And if you don't like what you see, it's not because I broke it." Behind her, a large screen blinked on. Slides began rolling, pay comparisons, retention stats, exit interviews, then footage, time-stamped internal security cam clips. The first, Amalia at her desk, answering the call from her nanny. The screen clearly shows the words Ellie emergency. Time 3:04 p.m. She leaves the office at 3:16. Then a cut to Price's internal email sent at 3:27 p.m. Brooks exited without approved time off. Violation. Recommend termination without severance. Cameras confirm. We're covered. Then came a second clip. Another employee white 2 days later. Similar phone call. Similar rush to leave. 1 hour later, a handwritten note from her manager. "Sam, don't worry about a thing. Hope your mom's okay. Take a few paid days." Amalia turned back to the room. "The difference?" she asked, still calm. "One had a sick mother. The other was the problem. And I'll let y'all guess which one was which." Price shifted in his chair. For a moment, he tried to rise, maybe to speak, maybe to salvage whatever reputation he still clung to. But his lawyer quietly rested a hand on his arm and pulled him back down. Even he knew the performance was over. And out there, somewhere in internet land, videos were already trending. How not to fire a black woman in 2025. After nearly 2 hours of evidence, testimony, and uncomfortable silence, the board adjourned for deliberation. Amalia stepped outside into the hallway, staring out at the street below. Protesters, reporters, curious passers-by, folks holding signs, folks holding phones. And now, they all knew her name. 40 minutes later, she was called back in. The board chair looked pale, tired, like someone had handed him a subpoena instead of a briefing memo. "Ms. Brooks," he began, his voice a half-octave lower, "the board acknowledges that your termination was unjust. Effective immediately, Mr. Price is placed on administrative leave pending further review. Additionally, the board agrees to establish a new division focused on ethics and equity." He cleared his throat. "And we would like to offer you the opportunity to lead it with full autonomy, reporting directly to the board." You could hear a pin drop. Amalia tilted her head slightly, paused like she was thinking. Then she nodded once. "Under one condition," the chair looked up, "which is, you're going to publish an apology, a real one, not one of those corporate word salads full of regret and unintended consequences. I want an admission. We were wrong, not just to me, but to everyone you pushed out. Everyone whose names never made it into this room because they didn't have the strength or the support. That's the only way this works. Otherwise, you'll get a year-long legal storm with more receipts than your servers can handle." The chair blinked, then slowly nodded. 3 days later, Hardin Tech's official LinkedIn page published a statement. "We acknowledge systemic failures within our organization. We apologize to Miss Amalia Brooks and to every employee silenced, sidelined, or dismissed unfairly. This was not personal, it was systemic. And from this moment forward, it will not be tolerated." From her new office on the 37th floor, with views that stretched across the Manhattan skyline, Amalia placed a framed photo on her desk. Ellie, mid-laugh, an oxygen mask barely hiding the grin of a child who'd already learned how to fight. She hadn't climbed her way to this office through promotions or favors. She carved a path through war. Later that week, the new interim HR director, a young white man with nervous energy and oversized glasses, knocked on her open door. Ms. Brooks, I wanted to ask about the updated policy for emergency family leave." Amalia smiled. Not the sweet smile. The other one. The one full of memory. "Rule number 1, she said. If a mother's phone rings, she answers it. Every time." New York exhaled. Maybe it was coincidence, maybe not, but the morning after Hardin Tech's statement hit the web, the city felt lighter. The subway didn't reek like usual. Honking cabbies seemed to chill. Even the pigeons, normally acting like they had vendettas against Joy, behaved themselves. Amalia Brooks sat in her new office lobby, technically Chief Equity and Ethics Officer. The title was big, but the room was simple. Wooden desk, wide glass windows, no carpet. She specifically requested that. Nothing to hide dirt under, literally or metaphorically. On her desk sat a chipped coffee mug that read, "I'm not here for optics," a framed photo of Ellie, and a note from her best friend Tiffany. "Let them try to fire you again. Just let them try." She hadn't forgotten. Not the humiliation, not the whispered side eyes in the hallway, and definitely not the way Price had looked at her that day, like she was just another box checked off his to-do list. But now her name wasn't whispered. It trended. Across Twitter, LinkedIn, morning news shows, CNN called her the new face of corporate integrity, as if integrity used to wear khakis and hold a Wharton degree. At first, the attention swarmed her like bees to a fresh spill of honey. Recruiters emailed. Podcasts wanted interviews. A publishing house asked her to write a memoir titled, "Smile and Shut Up Until You Don't." She declined. "This isn't about an explosion," she told them. "It's about a decision, a choice to speak." The system cracking, that was just a side effect. At Hardin Tech, things had changed, at least on the surface. Every complaint submitted was now read. Not skimmed, not summarized, read aloud. At meetings, by managers, by directors. The people who used to label her too emotional now had to hear every emotion they'd buried. But let's be real. What really changed? They were scared of her now. She saw it. Every new hire who entered her office walked like they were stepping on hallowed ground. Every diversity report read like a confessional, written carefully, nervously, like a college essay you hope your mama never sees. It was awkward, but it was fair. And still, Amalia wanted more. One Tuesday, she walked unannounced into a board meeting. People stood up, not out of protocol, but because that's what you do when a woman who reshaped your whole company walks in uninvited. "We've got 90 days, she said, clicking her laptop open to a presentation. 90. Not for a proposal, for a plan, implementation, anti-discrimination policies that work. That means audits, real training, anonymous evaluations. And if any of you decide that's too expensive or not mission critical, I've got media contacts who'd love to know why." One of the board elders, a man whose tie probably cost more than her first apartment, raised his hand, attempting diplomacy. "Ms. Brooks, surely you understand, real change takes time." She turned to him, head tilted slightly. "And you, Mr. Welling, need to understand that Black women aren't your mood lighting. We're not here to make your business look inclusive. We are not decoration. We're reality. And if your company can't handle that, then it deserves to fall." Silence, heavy, long, and beautiful. But the moment Amalia would remember forever didn't happen in that office. 2 months later, she was invited to speak at her niece's middle school. Topic: how to fight injustice in real life. The kids were polite. Teachers nodded too eagerly. But when she started speaking, faces changed. "When they fired me," she began, standing at a worn-out podium in a school gym that smelled like pencil shavings and dreams, "they didn't offer an apology. No severance, no questions, just a decision, swift and quiet. Because people like me were easiest to erase when we stay quiet." She let that sit. "You know what got me labeled difficult? Not my work, not my attitude. Just one thing. I opened my mouth, like the time a white colleague said, 'Wow, you speak so clearly. Are you really from the Bronx?' 'Yeah, I'm from the Bronx.' What was I supposed to thank her for that backhanded compliment wrapped in white ignorance?" The students laughed, but not lightly. It was that, "oh snap, I know this story" kind of laugh. They'll tell you to be patient, to give it time, and when you finally snap, they'll say you're angry, unprofessional. So don't snap. Be precise. Be surgical. Be ice cold. Come with receipts, with dates, with facts. Speak so clearly they have to listen, even when they don't want to. After the talk, a young girl, 16 maybe, with box braids and sharp eyes, walked up to her. "Did you ever want to quit?" she asked, notebook in hand. Amalia smiled. That kind of smile that feels like an ache and a prayer all at once. "Every day." But then I'd look at my daughter, and I'd remember, if I quit, one day she might think silence was my choice. And I couldn't let her believe that. I needed her to know I chose to fight, even tired, even scared. 6 months later, Hardin Tech landed on the national list of top companies for progressive workplace reform. Not because they had some epiphany, but because they had a woman who stopped letting them pretend nothing was wrong. The media tried branding her again. The Black Erin Brockovich. Only with Wi-Fi and sharper comebacks. She laughed, shook her head. Keep your labels. I'm just a mama who got pushed too far on the wrong day. One evening, sitting on the couch with Ellie, watching her doodle cartoons with magic markers, Amalia looked over and asked softly, "Do you know what Mommy did?" Without looking up, Ellie said, "You saved me." Amalia exhaled through a grin. "Yours, baby girl, and mine, with one phone call. The end. And if anyone else dares to call a woman like her a bad fit for company culture, they'd better ask first what culture she runs now. Because Amalia Brooks, she's not just a name on a report. She's a chapter, and no one's got the right to rewrite her anymore."